Hello everyone, it's Charlton, and I just want to talk a little bit more about this, the Mollie Tibbetts case, and I will make other videos. I promise you. It's just right now this whole story has completely consumed me, and it does continue to develop. We're still, I think, far from knowing everything that's going on here, and because right now the headlines are that the family farm where Cristhian Rivera, the person who's charged with first-degree murder of Mollie Tibbetts, where he lived and worked, is got connections to the GOP. It says over at the USA Today, but there are several headlines that read this way: Cristhian Rivera, charged in Mollie Tibbetts' death, worked at Iowa GOP family farm, and the owners of the family farm, Dane Lane and Eric Lane. I think Eric Lane is possibly Dane's son. And Dane's brother is a prominent Republican official in Iowa. He ran for the Secretary of Agriculture in 2018. I'm presuming he lost, and that's him pictured right there. That is Craig Lang, and Dane Lang is his brother on the left. I think Eric is his son. I think Eric actually knows Mollie Tibbetts and knows Jake and Scott Tibbetts, and the whole family is just destroyed. But is very, very sorry for everything that's happened, and just they knew him personally. In any event, there are political elements to this story for sure, and I do think that some of the press, you're seeing these headlines are meant to kind of blunt the controversial nature of this entire story. The fact that you now have an undocumented immigrant charged with first-degree murder of this girl who, had her whole life ahead of her. She's been missing for a month. It has captured the attention of the entire nation. It turns out an illegal, undocumented immigrant is the one who's charged with her murder, and so forth. So, and that's, Trump even made a statement last night when he was at the West Virginia rally saying that this should have never happened, and that it's, he blamed our immigration laws, and it just should have never happened, that he should have never been in the country to begin with. It's what Trump said. And I do think that some of these headlines, the fact that the farm is connected to the GOP, are meant to sort of blunt that kind of rhetoric that's going to come from the other side of the aisle, from the right side of the aisle, from Trump. But let me come back to that later in the video. And first, let me just talk a little bit about his version of what happened. And it's in the affidavit. I already read through this last night. I don't need to do it again. But I will just reference one part, which is the part where he blacks out. That's, it just seemed strikingly similar to a movie that I remembered, which is Primal Fear. I don't know if you've ever seen this. This is with Richard Gere. I forget this actor's name. I should know it. He's a famous actor, and this is a famous movie. And actually, it's about priest molestation. And this person who claims to be like a multiple personality, schizophrenic, and he blacks out, or he loses time is what he calls it in the movie. Whenever something gets violent, or he feels immense stress or whatever, and he becomes this other person, which is Roy. And Roy is the person who does all the the violent encounter and kills people and stuff like that. So, but it just seemed his story kind of, and I'll read it real quick. Well, let me read his. And I'm not the person. I'm just telling you what comes to my mind. I could be totally wrong. These are just some of my thoughts that I'm pouring out onto the screen. And many of my thoughts about this case, about who might have been behind Mollie's death before we heard the announcement yesterday, were completely wrong. They were not even close. So you can take that for whatever for what it's worth. But let me just read a few statements from the affidavit for his arrest warrant, which is his statements of what happened. Just to kind of review that, because I do have some thoughts on on that, and that I'm not so sure. Obviously, the believability of somebody blacking out immediately as the assault begins, and then only coming to right before you're about to dispose of the body, so that you would have knowledge of where the body is. The believability of that is not very high, obviously. So, but again, it just kind of it reminded me of this. This is instantly what I thought of when I saw it, and I don't know. So. But it says Rivera admitted to making contact with a female running in Brooklyn, and that he pursued her in his vehicle in the area of East Brooklyn, Poweshiek County, Iowa. Defendant Rivera stated he parked the vehicle, got out and was running behind her and alongside of her. Rivera stated she grabbed her phone and said, "I'm going to call the police." Rivera said he then panicked and got mad, and that he then blocked his memory, which is what he does when he gets very upset, and doesn't remember anything after that until he came to at an intersection. Rivera stated he then made a U-turn, drove back to an entrance to a field, and then drove into a driveway to a cornfield. He noticed there was an earpiece from headphones in his lap, and that is how he realized he put her in the trunk. He went to get her out of the trunk, and he noticed blood on the side of her head. So, I mean, I don't know, it just...
You little fuck, you did it, you killed him. You son of a bitch, you fucking killed him.
No! What the hell you want from me now? Quit your crying, I can't understand a goddamn word you're saying. You little sissy, you make me sick.
So that's him turning into Roy whenever he's confronted with danger, and and then he loses memory, he loses time. That's what he calls it in there. And actually, at the end of this movie, it's just a movie, but at the end of the movie, actually, after Richard Gere gets him off, he slips up and he comes clean. He ends up telling him, that he fooled them all, including Richard Gere, his own attorney. But it's just a movie. But it came to mind when I was hearing this. So, I mean, here is, and I had totally messed this up. I was thinking, like he said, the assault happened on 385th Avenue, and it never occurred to me. And sometimes I'm a bit of an airhead, I really am. I have some brains, sometimes, but sometimes things go right over. It never occurred to me that 385th went the entire span of the town, and that there's an East 385th too, as well as the one that's by Dalton Jack's house, which is where she had been, where that one of the pink circles was. But this is where the assault reportedly occurred, and that she had been running, on Middle Street and Boundary Street, and he at some point parked his car, got out of it, and ran alongside of her, behind her, and then the attack occurred when she got scared, or was getting freaked out, and said, "I'm going to call the police," and threatened to call the police. And he chased her down and attacked her, and then he loses time. But there's a lot of houses here. I just don't understand how nobody saw that encounter. I mean, it just could have happened very quickly, and it's just the random laws of probability that nobody happened to be, see that at that time, and but it did seem odd to me. And the whole thing of just parking the car and getting out of the car, and then pursuing her, jogging alongside of her, that seemed kind of I don't know, like how that could be actually happen. It could if she's running, but it still seemed cumbersome to me. It's very possible, and it's very, that is what happened. But I just had this idea that a couple things. Two, the story he was telling me, it sounded to me, my first instinct was that sounded like a collaborative effort in terms of just who came up with that story. Like that would have been something like where say you're him and you're completely screwed, and you just say, what should I say? And it sounds like somebody gave him advice on what to say. But he could have came up with that whole story himself, but I don't know. The other thought that I had is that basically that he wasn't alone, and that this didn't happen the way it did. That it was really maybe, and some of these people suggest this in the comment, that maybe he was just hammered, drunk, or somebody was and ran her down, and it was an accident. And then basically came up with this whole story because there was multiple people in the car for one person to take the fall. Maybe he was the person driving, he was the person hammered, and the other persons in the car didn't want to be implicated, so they came up with this story. And I don't know. I mean, I will say that basically after the autopsy, that's going to determine a lot of that. And if it's shown that her clothes were not on her persons, if her clothes were like near the body but not on her where she was found, then I believe, at least portions of the story that was just him. There was nobody else, and then there's other questions about whether she was, brutally raped and killed and whatever. I just don't know. But so, back to some of the elements of the farm owners. And back to the farm, it's Yerby Farms, which is owned by Dane Lang, and I believe Eric Lang is listed as a property owner as well. And I think Eric Lang is maybe Dane Lang's son, I believe, and he maybe is the person who knows Mollie and Jake and Scott Tibbetts personally, and was spoken to by somebody, a reporter, and was on the verge of tears when speaking about it. Was just devastated by it. So, but it says in a statement Tuesday night, Dane Lang of Yerby Farm said Rivera was an employee in good standing and was shocked to hear Rivera was implicated in the death of Mollie Tibbetts. Dane Lang is related to Craig Lang, the former president of both the Iowa Farm Bureau Federation and the Iowa Board of Regents, and a 2018 Republican candidate for state Secretary of Agriculture. Documents immediately reviewed by the Des Moines Register listed several owners of Yerby Farms, including Dane Lang and Eric Lang, Craig's brother. And this is Dane Lang here, and this is Eric Lang, or not Eric Lang, excuse me. Now this is Craig Lang, and this is the Republican official in Iowa, and this is him. This is his Secretary of Agriculture campaign. And now they provided and they've also provided a full statement that says he was vetted through the E-Verify system and so forth. And let me read the statement from the Yerby Farms in full. They said, "First and foremost, our thoughts and prayers are with the family and friends of Mollie Tibbetts. This is a profoundly sad day for our community. All of us at Yerby Farms are shocked to hear that one of our employees was involved and is charged in this case. This individual has worked at our farms for 4 years, was vetted through the government's E-Verify system, and was an employee in good standing. On Monday, the authorities visited our farm and talked to our employees. We have cooperated fully with their investigation. Yerby Farms follows all laws related to verifying employees are legal to work in the United States, and we regularly seek outside counsel to ensure we stay up to date on employment law matters. We keep records on all employees and have shared that information with authorities. We appreciate the hard work of law enforcement officials. We will continue to cooperate with authorities as the investigation moves forward." So, obviously, I think the big question remains, and it remains a big question, is how did he get through the E-Verify system if he was, in fact, an illegal and an undocumented immigrant? And over at Fox, initially, it seems as though identity fraud, is probably the likely reason how he managed to get through the E-Verify system, It says identity fraud is the most common way illegal immigrants and unscrupulous employers try to thwart the system, said Jessica Vaughn, the director of policy studies for the Center of Immigration Studies. The illegal worker could present a fraudulent identity that will pass E-Verify, she told Fox News on Wednesday, and an employer or hiring manager who knows that identity might be sketchy could look the other way. While the details regarding how Rivera may have gamed the system remain unclear, Vaughn said many of the cases prosecuted in the past have seen illegal immigrants simply purchase fraudulent identities. So I think, in fact, people who are incarcerated sell their identities because it's no use to them. There have been cases of inmates selling their identities because they are incarcerated and don't need them. In one Massachusetts case, a hiring manager actually had an agreement with an identity vendor across the street. All right, so it continues. I mean, it's not likely DACA because that was a question. And myself, I thought maybe it was that because he's been here for possibly, they say 4 to 7 years. 7 years would put him at 17 years old, as a teenager. But according to this expert Vaughn, that's not possible or very, very unlikely. Rivera's arrival to the U.S. as a teenager has also raised question about if he may have been a so-called dreamer who may have qualified for the Obama administration's deferred action for childhood arrivals. Vaughn, however, said it is unlikely because to qualify for DACA, an illegal immigrant child must have lived in the U.S. for at least 5 years prior to 2012. If Rivera arrived in 2011, the earliest officials believed he could have crossed the border from Mexico, he would not fit the criteria. So it's not likely that he, would have qualified for DACA. Let me try to wrap this up, and I want to end on the last thing, and I think it was Braden Crow. I think you were the dude who mentioned this. You gave 2 comments, and this was one of them. And I discussed with my wife before the suspect was the person was charged with murder, and that it was really odd, that Pence met with the family. It's highly unusual. I understood that Iowa is a very politically important state, and it just has political implications for 2020, even though Trump isn't really probably going to be primary challenged. It still has, it's a critical state, and farmers, it could go either way. It's just a strange thing politically. And like I've already described, a lot of the people I think of Iowa live conservative lifestyles, but, you know, there is other issues. So the fact that he met with them, you know, I don't know what it was last week, a week ago with the family, and the family expressed, you know, how they were touched by, you know, and I like Mike Pence. But it definitely seemed odd to me. And now that we know all that we know, I definitely kind of get the feeling that somebody knew something before the announcement was made, even before the body was, you know, discovered. You know, and it seemed like to me that that a family farm that has connections to the GOP, that something went up through back channels to start to talk about what was coming. I mean, it just seems so strange to me that that Pence is talking to the family, and basically, I mean, you know, and somebody just knew something. I don't, you know, whether it's, you know, other migrants on the farm knew it. The farm owners, you know, were made aware of it, and then this thing, it's just it's highly weird to me, definitely. You know, that Pence met with them, and then we now know this. You know, it's just strange, man. This whole thing is the fact of where it happened. You know, at 8:30 at night with all these is strange to me too. The other point I would make, and I'll close with this, and I don't have I'm a conservative, libertarian. I don't have deeply held beliefs about immigration. You know, I can see the point of having a wall. I can, definitely. I don't have a problem with the wall, but also it's not like something that's super important to me. I mean, basically, immigration doesn't affect me. But I do think that there's a certain element of complete lawlessness that just surrounds the issue in many many different ways. You know, one of which is like, I think his identity was fake. I mean, I don't know if he really is Cristhian Bahena Rivera. I was saying, you know, it's difficult to talk about in this setting, but, you know, there's just a certain element of lawlessness to this whole topic of immigration that has just got tentacles in all directions. That, you know, it's got completely out of control. I mean, one of which is that, you know, you have other, I mean, I do think that it's very possible people in the FBI was trying to get people to come forward with information because there was a sense that maybe some migrants knew something, but they were afraid to come forward because they were afraid they were going to be deported. So you have that element. Then you have the element of potentially business owners who, you know, may have knowledge of something, you know, of a crime. You know, and yet are afraid to talk to authorities because they're afraid of exposing something that's going on at their business. You know, you have. I mean, it's very. I mean, when I see the videos of his girlfriend, and I'm not talking about her specifically, but I'm saying she looks young, and I think her parents are here. But I'm feeling this dude came by himself. You know, and I think there's other young men that are coming age 16, 17 or younger. You know, and they're just coming on their own, you know, because it's the word was out that if you come as a minor, you're going to be allowed to stay, and then they've just you know, they survive, but they're more or less raising themselves, you know, and that's not necessarily such a good thing, okay, you know. Then I lost my train of thought there for a second, but I remember what I wanted to say, and it's in terms of like, you know, all these elements of lawlessness. I remember seeing the story of there was like seven illegal immigrants that were, you know, doing a robbery in a bank, you know, and they go into this a bank inside of a mall or something like that. They were eventually stopped by a security guard, and then another person who just had a concealed carry weapon, and two guys got the drop on them, and they all were they prevented the robbery, and all of them were sent to prison. And the likelihood was that all seven of them, and they had already been deported several times before, were going to just get deported and sent back to Mexico, you know, or wherever they came from, you know. So, and the point is that, I mean, a lot of times I think, and I don't know this for a fact, but I have a very strong suspicion that, you know, if the crime is not, you know, super serious, it's easier for the authorities to just deport them than to put them through the criminal process and house them in jails and so forth. And our jails are completely overcrowded to begin, you know, already. So, I mean, it's almost, I mean, it's insane. And it's basically, it's like you're actually better off being a foreign criminal in our country than an American criminal. It's not humorous, but you know, it's like they have an edge, a competitive edge over American criminals. But it's like this ideal situation, and as long as you haven't done something that's egregiously bad, like, you know, rape or murder, and even in those cases it's debatable, but a lot of times they're just let go, or they're just taken back to the border and deported and set free. It's almost like they're better off being a criminal here than being a criminal in their own native nations, because if they get caught, they might just get let go. I'm just illustrating that there's this massive lawlessness to this entire issue that's gotten completely out of control. And, you know, this is probably not maybe the appropriate forum to talk about, but it's staring you right in the face. In fact, I think this family is fairly liberal. I think Mollie was fairly liberal, which is obviously just fine, man. So sorry for the family, man. So sorry for them. But that's the story there, man. And that's the end of this video. Thanks for watching my videos. Please subscribe to my channel. Give me a like down below. And I will see you in the next video. Later, man.